You're welcome to my channel. Today's topic is 10 steps to analyzing poems independently. This video is divided into 3 parts. Part 1, we talk about step 1, which is read the poem. Step 2, identify the theme. Step 3, examine the structure. And step 4, analyze language and imagery. Then when we get to part 2, we will talk about step 5, explore sound and rhythm. Step 6, consider the tone and mood. And step 7, investigate the poet's background. And the last part of this video, we'll talk about step 8, which is connect with personal experience. Step 9, consider different interpretation. And lastly, step 10, write a personal response. Welcome to part 1 of 10 steps to analyzing poems independently. In this part 1, we'll learn step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4, which are read the poem, identify the theme, examine the structure, and analyze language and imagery. What should you do when you meet a poem for the first time? The first step to analyzing a poem is reading the poem out loud. One-time reading may not always give you a perfect understanding of the text. What do? You read it again and again. As you're reading the poem, these are the things you need to take note of. Try to gain a general understanding of the content. What is the writer trying to say? I must tell you that some writers are so skillful with language in such a way that if you're not careful, you might read a poem almost up to 5 times and you may not be able to decode what the writer is trying to say. So you may need to read in between the lines to get the understanding of the content. As you're taking note of the content, take note of the structure. Are there some sentence structures that are unusual as you're reading? Are you able to identify some language features such as figurative expression, sound devices? Are you able to take note of those ones? Maybe in a poem, you saw the writer say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. Of course, this sentence simply means that Peter Piper, name of someone, picked something, an action, a peck, a portion, right, of pickled pepper, right? But that is not just all about it. As I was reading it, you could tell that the writer has added much more than the content. You could feel a sound device that has been put into play here. That is the p sound that comes along with it, right? So you need to take note of all those things when you are reading your text. That is the poem. Poems are not just to be read like every other text. Poems are meant to be read out loud. As you're reading it out loud, you are following the rhythm, the rhyme scheme, and every twist and turn that the writer engaged in while writing. Poems are usually emotionally laden. The emotions that you can find in poems could be a sad one, light one, just different emotions are usually expressed. Now, you should pay your attention to those emotions that are conveyed by the poem. That is when you are reading. After reading, what is the next thing to do? Go through the poem and extract those words that you're not familiar with. Try to extract them and find out the meaning of those words. Especially if you have read it once and you didn't get it, there is the need for you to actually extract those words and try and see if after knowing the meaning of those words, your understanding of the poem improves. Haven't gotten that done, the next thing to do is to go ahead and identify the themes. What are themes in a literary work? Themes are the central ideas that are expressed in any literary text, be it poem or any other text. What is the key message the writer wants you to know? That is the theme. Determine the central theme or the message of the poem. Ask yourself, for instance, what the poet is trying to express or explore. And the themes in a literary work could really be so much. Could range from love, nature, social issues, personal reflection, religion, and just name it. How do you now identify the theme? Take a look at this. Just listen to this poem I have for you. This is a poem written by someone. I'm just picking it randomly to teach this aspect. Someone wrote, and the poem goes like this. I have not said you are not good. No one can be as good as you. You know you hated me with passion, but you said you could die for me. My hopes and all you dashed to stones. You bear my back before the sun. We've killed a day within me now, a stigma that would last through life. Best of angels you would have been had I but known your far side show. I have not said you are not good. No one can be as good as you. In this short poem I've given to you, what do you think is the theme? You can see that there's a theme of regret here. Maybe the speaker, that is the poetic persona, is regretting ever maybe knowing the object of his address, right? And we can tell that something has to do with love is involved in this poem, because it said, you know you hate me with passion, but you said you could die for me. These are emotionally laden expressions. Now, how do you tell the mood of the poem? If someone said, I have not said you are not good, no one can be as good as you, and as the poem goes further, we get to see that the poetic persona saying that best of angels you would have been had I but known your far side show. Take note of that. That should tell you that the poetic persona is regretting ever falling for the far side the person was showcasing, hiding the true self behind a facade. When you've been able to identify the theme, which I said is the central message in the poem, the next thing to do is to take note of the structure in depth. When you are analyzing the structure of a poem, you should take note of the form of the poem. Is it a free verse? Is it a blank verse? An ode? A sonnet? Even if it's a sonnet, what type of sonnet? Is it a Shakespearean sonnet? Is it a Spencerian sonnet? Is it an Italian sonnet? You need to know what form it is. Even the rhythm, you need to look at the rhythm as well, and the rhyme scheme. Unlike every other text, poetry is the most stingy type of literature text you will ever meet. Maybe the poet might not actually know what he has written or the depth of what he has written, but when you are analyzing any literary text, especially poetry, don't take for granted any word within the text. Every single word in the text has a purpose to perform. I believe you got that, did you? Good. For example, if you take a look at any Shakespearean sonnet, you discover that every word there is measured. Yeah, and the measurement in poems, we use what we call meter. Of course, it's not the meter you use to measure your clothes or anyway, but I believe if you've done a little bit of music, you must have heard of the word beat. Even if you don't need to do music, if you've ever listened to music, you know that every music has beats. And if you have the time, I would want you to go search out for a particular video titled Foley. I don't really know what language that is, but Foley, according to the owner of the video, is on YouTube, means rhythm. And in that video, the publisher tried to make you understand that everything around you has a rhythm. And if you listen carefully, everything can always flow into the rhythm that is never stopping. So, same thing applies to poetry. Poetry is rhythmic. So every single word in the line of poem matters. In fact, as far as the syllable, even deep down to the morpheme or phoneme, right? You should also take note of the stanzaic delineation, the stanzaic arrangement. How many stanzas is the poem written in? Even if you know the number of stanzas, are the stanzas regularly or evenly shared? Are some of them longer than others? You need to take note of that. For example, you also even need to take note of how long the line of the poems are. For example, if a particular line is short, that could signal abruptness, could signal anger, could signal someone that is agitated. Whereas a longer sentence could signal a relaxed mood or slow rhythm, or sometimes it could also mean complexity, especially when the form of the sentence is in a complex sentence form. The next step, which is the fourth step you should take when you're trying to analyze a poem independently, is to look at the language and imagery. What is language and what is imagery? Language has to do with how a writer expresses himself. Does the writer use metaphor? Does he use simile and other literary devices like paradox, oxymoron, innuendo, irony? Take note of those. Does he use sound devices like alliteration, onomatopoeia? These are what you should consider. And if those devices, if those language features are present, it is not just enough that they are present. You need to look deeper than that. If there is a simile, for instance, there is a reason for using the simile. What effect has the writer been able to create with the use of such a literary device, that language feature? For my learners that will be taking IGCSE literature, your knowledge of writer's effect is going to play a very major role, because you will need that knowledge when it comes to analyzing literary texts. Every single expression, I cannot be tired of repeating that, is deliberately used. So you need to find out the reason the writer had used such expression, such imagery, such language form. The next thing under language and imagery is to consider the imagery that has been employed and its contribution to the overall meaning of the text. What are imageries? Let's go back to the poem I just recited not quite long, the poem titled Regret. Let me read again. I have not said you are not good. No one can be as good as you. You know you hate me with passion, but you said you could die for me. My hopes and all you dashed to stones. You bear my back before the sun. We've killed a day within me now, a stigma that would last through life. Let me pause there. From all that I've read so far, can you picture anything in your mind? Can you picture a sad girl, maybe? A sad lady? Can you picture someone that is walking at noonday with nothing on his back and the sun is hitting so hard? Can you picture something like that? If you cannot actually picture what I'm actually having in my mind right now, but sure, there's something that you could picture in your mind. Like a picture, you could enter the world of this poet. Yes, you could. That picture you are having in your mind right now is called imagery. In fact, the word imagination, I always want to term I learned is coined from the word imagination. Imagination is a nation where you have a lot of images. Yes, take it from me, say Mr. Ayo told you so. Yes, imagination is a nation where you have lots of images. So in your imagination, you could picture the image that could be associated with this expression that the poet has put forward to you. When you have been able to identify these images, now that you have been able to identify these images, has it affected how you see the poem? Does your understanding of the poem change? How has it changed? This is the purpose of the images the poet has used in the poem you have picked. That is it for the first part of 10 steps to analyzing poems independently. Please check back for part 2 and part 3 of this video. Till I come your way again, stay blessed. Please don't go without subscribing. Your subscription matters a lot to me.